Good afternoon and hello, or good morning, depending on when you're watching this. My name is Pauline Perot, and I am responsible for delivering online webinars for the North American Youth Exchange Network. And this month in October, I have our guest with us, Haresh Ramchandani, and he is from District 7020 in Jamaica. Haresh, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Well, hello everybody. Really good to be here. Yes, as you heard, my name is Haresh Ramchandani, and I'm from Montego Bay, Jamaica, which is in the Northern Caribbean. In the Rotary world, it's District 7020, and our district is quite an interesting district. We have 10 countries, 16 islands, and 3 languages. And we have a lot of fun. You can just imagine our district conferences for Rotary. We go from island to island depending on where the district governor for that year is from. So I've been a Rotarian for 23 years now, and really love the Rotary experience and what it brings, well, to me personally, and of course by extension, to be able to do some good in the community as well.
Awesome. So we're going to spend the next 20 to 30 minutes here with our listeners. And just to frame this, you're in the right spot. If you are a youth exchange officer worldwide, of course, but we're serving the North American audience. And so if Haresh looks familiar to you, perhaps you attended the international conference in Hamburg last year, where he served as the impeccable MC. And one of your passions, and correct me if I'm wrong, in life and in Rotary is leadership development.
Yeah. So I actually have a very, how do I put this? A very different take on the Rotary membership experience. You know, we've been hovering as an organization with a membership of around 1.2 going, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years. Boy, it feels longer than that. We've always been hearing 1.2 million members. And, you know, I have come to believe, based on my experience, that I do not believe we have a membership problem in Rotary. I believe we have a leadership problem. And you know, I was district governor for Rotary, as I said, in the our District 7020 Northern Caribbean allowed me to travel all across to the different islands, and I was able to even visit many clubs in the mainland of North America. And I started noticing a pattern. And this translates not just to Rotary, but this translates into organizations in the world. You know, you look at, in this case, clubs that are struggling. You look at events that are struggling, and you look at businesses that are struggling, and you start to notice that the leadership is lacking, the leadership is weak. And then on the flip side of it, you start to look at, say, corporations that are booming, doing exceptional well. You look at Rotary clubs where you start to feel the vibrancy and the impact. And you start to see a pattern again. You start to see that they have some strong leadership. And as I said, I've been in Rotary for 23 years. And I mean, I am a high school dropout, basically. I pretty much ended right there. I didn't go any further. I was barely able to even do the final exams. I had a family emergency and I had to look after that. So my entire experience of development going into business, being able to be the president of my Rotary club, to be district governor, and all of his experience has been through the opportunities that Rotary allowed me to have, presented me. All little building blocks, stepping stones, small exposures. You know, you visualize an onion and you're peeling off the different layers. That's what a Rotary and its programs allow us to. It allows us to develop as a human being, and its leadership, it's at our forefront. I feel upset in some regard because I don't believe it is getting that kind of attention that it deserves. Leadership development, I'm talking about. You know, when you join Rotary, or you go into Rotaract, Interact. In our district, we have a program even younger than that called Early Act. Mm-hmm. And youth exchange, and you start to look at all these youth programs, and there's so much focus on service. And service is great. I mean, service above self is our motto as an organization. But service and our other core values of integrity and diversity and fellowship, all of these things can only be enhanced if we have a strong leadership. And I don't think it gets enough attention. It doesn't get the importance that I think it needs, that it deserves, that it requires for us to do so much more out there. And so that's why I've got this passion, because of my personal exposure, what I've benefited from it, and what I believe others can benefit too. Not just Rotary clubs, or in this case, youth exchange participants, but just generally the world. I mean, you see the chaos in the world right now, especially during COVID-19. You see the response from community to country, leadership,
Hmm.
or the lack thereof. It comes down to leadership. Simple as that. Fix that problem, and I think you fix a lot of the problems in the world. So that's why my passion is there for it, you know?
Yeah, really great. And when we look at the world of youth exchange, there are folks who are tuning in who are members of their district youth exchange program. So they got involved at the club level. Their passion in Rotary became youth exchange, so they got involved at the district level. Some districts serve as a single district, so they run it as an independent district, and many districts across Canada and the U.S. Serve as multi-districts. So then many districts come together. So the reason I'm sharing that is the more people that get involved, you and I know, the more chances for leadership, if we can call it that, to go sideways. There's different opinions, there's different directions people want to go in, there's different thoughts of how things need to be done. So I'm curious if you could give us a couple tools or ideas as to as groups get together, as districts get together and multi-districts, that they can take away some of your experiences and thoughts on leadership as to how they can improve things in their world. What might you want to start with?
So I'm going to start with something I got exposed to a long time ago, and it was through Art of Living. And it really made me change the way I looked at things. And a very simple but profound statement that I learned was that accept people in situations as they are. When I was younger, I used to get angry sometimes. Why isn't this person doing it this way? I had these sort of expectations of what I think things and how things should be done. And that profound statement just changed how I approach things, and allowed me to just kind of reflect and think about what they were doing. You know, the truth is, I think everybody means well. They just perceive things a little bit differently. When I was researching how to be a good leader, because as again, I think everything stems from that. And if you wanted to do that, you want to know what those building blocks of leadership is. And I think that would solve a lot of the problems. You're talking about challenges in a group. You're talking about lack of vision. You talk about one person just want to do it and hug up the whole committee without embracing others and getting different perspective. These are all challenges that is not just unique to youth exchange, not just unique to Rotary, but just generally it happens even in the workforce across the world. Uh, and I think just some simple tips on leadership, I think would help everybody. And if you could just anyone could Google it. Like just look up what should a good leader have? Huh? Some attributes of a good leader, and you start to see simple things pop up. One of them is patience.
Hmm.
As simple and but it's so profound. Patience. Nobody's at the same speed, and nobody's at the same level, and that's okay. Being patient, I think, is a very strong virtue, and I think a good leader should have that. Another virtue I think a good leader should have, which I think would help in those challenges you just spoke about, is being honest, right? Uh, you should be okay to speak your mind. If you don't like a particular direction, why do we feel uncomfortable not to say it? So the first thing I would do whenever I bring a group of people together is say these words to them. I tell them this is safe space because we're in this journey together and we are all trying to achieve the same result. And for that to happen, you have to be comfortable to speak your mind. You have to be comfortable sharing how you feel. So this is absolutely safe space. And you are not going to get reprimanded for saying something that is against the status quo, that is against what the leader is. Uh, and speaking of the leader, if you're going to ask everybody and tell them this is safe space and we want you to speak your mind and we're going to have patience with you, I would suggest to you, don't go first. Don't speak first. Allow the group to talk, because that allows everyone to, and of course, you want to encourage them to speak, the truth, and whatever they're saying, positive, or there could be some negative comments that passes along too. Tell them it's fine. I appreciate it. Thank you for your honesty, which is another trait. You got to be honest, right? Thank you for your honesty, and allow the group, the room, to be comfortable in being able to speak their mind, speak their heart, because that is the only way you're going to get buy-in from everybody, when everybody understands that. So those are some of the things that, there's a lot more, but those are a few things that I would recommend you do, especially when you've got these challenges bringing groups together.
Mhm.
I got a couple more little tips if you want, I could share with them, or if you got some other questions, I could do that as well.
Sure. I was
However
just
you feel.
wanted to share the thoughts that were coming to mind as I was listening to
Yeah.
you. One of the things that I see and hear in youth exchange along patience is, we look at the average age of a Rotarian that is involved in the program, and then the target audience, which is a teenager. Sometimes that's decades and decades of a gap, and no disrespect intended. But when we talk about patience and understanding, I mean, some of us, I might be a little closer in age to that teenage demographic, so I might understand that world, like TikTok, or why aren't they responding to our advertisements that we put up in the high school? Don't they look at posters anymore? So part of it is that understanding. And what was coming up in listening to you was often that seek first to understand principle. You said, like, have them speak your truth, create the safe space. But also when I do that, you take the time to explore what I have to say. And if we're coming from two different vantage points, I think that's what makes the best teams. But often we don't have the skill set to be able to navigate those difficult challenges. So I shut you down or you shut me down. And the best idea stays off the table because we don't have that trust, right? We say we have all this space that you're saying you've created as ground rules. So that's just some of my on the ground experience.
No, I agree with you. In fact, I just got excited. You just touched on one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I'm saying to myself, it just a bell just hit a while ago when you hit that habit. That is something everybody needs to know. And if you don't know or have not heard of 7 habits of highly effective people, pause this webinar right now, right? Pause it. Don't close it, pause it. Open up your browser or go on your phone and search 7 habits of highly effective people by Stephen Covey. And I think you need to digest those, because those habits is going to help you uh, be a master of whatever you want to be in this world. You will be a master of that. I live by those principles of 7 habits of highly effective people. And I just got jitters that you mentioned one of those habits of seeking first to understand. Yeah.
And I think the other way we could offer our listeners to actually use that habit is sometimes, I mean, it doesn't take long to have polarization in a group, right? We get more than two people, and quite frankly, it's boring if you and I always agree on everything. But how we handle that conversation is the opportunity. When I'm looking at your background, Rotary opens opportunities. That's the theme this year. One of the things that I've done in my own leadership journey with teams, there's also that I don't know the proper name for it. It's like the hat exercise, like the red hat, the white hat, the yellow hat. And so one's like, well, let's look at this strategically. Let's look at it through a data lens. Let's look at it. And sometimes it's really cool to just say to the group, okay, so let's put this idea on the table, but I'll look at it through a critical lens of critique, right? So it's not about you bringing the idea. It's like, let's just park the idea on the table and I'll go around and say, like, what are the challenges here and what are the pros and cons, so that we get that kind of discussion out. because there are a lot of challenging things, like when I'm thinking of what our audience might be going through, which international partners to choose, that becomes contextual because every international partner has different rules on what they're going to take in a student. The age band of students, Rotary International gives us a ballpark, but every program gets to choose within that. Are we going to take the youngest student? Would we take someone who's 18? All of these become highly contextual. Where should we hold our annual training meeting? Should we move it online? Are we participating this year? These are all the things that are coming across my path as people are getting into the next season of youth exchange.
Yeah, so there are these challenges across the globe with all types of entities, youth exchange being no exception. And frankly, again, it comes to leadership. What are you going to do? Should you have it? Should you do it virtual? I am reminded of a challenge that has started coming out, especially during COVID-19, that people are facing right now. And I think it's important that we embrace this, we talk about it, because this is going to set the stage whether you start to bring people together, especially going through what has transpired with COVID-19, or if you're going to bring them together virtually. And that is this new style of leadership that is out there that people don't talk about too much. We know whatever we mentioned earlier was the traditional styles, and this new style, what we call uh, emotional vulnerability and
Mm.
openness. Okay, this is big, and many people are going through that right now. And I think this type of leadership style is something that we need to talk about because it is too important right now. First of all, we need to accept that to be emotional is human. I mean, I get emotional. In fact, I got emotional not even a week ago. I went through an experience, and it took me through some very interesting places, and I had to embrace it. I said, "Okay, Harish, okay, this has transpired. I accept it. How do I move on beyond it?" It took me a while, and I'm still not there yet. I'm not 100% there yet. But the first step was for me to look within and say, yes, to be emotional is to be human, and then use that to invite openness and lead by example, right? Use emotional vulnerability, very important, as a method of connection. So when you have youth exchange leaders trying to bring participants together, for example, uh, identify that, let them know it's okay. We know you've gone through some really, really interesting times, and you may be having some difficulties.
Hmm.
Youth exchange is a positive platform to talk about that
Hmm.
because we want to help you to grow from that
Hmm.
because it exists. Let's not say it doesn't exist and no one has gone through this entire experience without any problems. We all have in some shape or form. So talking about that emotional vulnerability is a soft skills style of leadership right now that I think is key for everybody, including and probably more importantly with the youth exchange participants.
Yeah, I'm thinking all sorts of things listening to this. One is like when I look at the emotional vulnerability just of the youth exchange officers, everyone's talking about, so we have to sit a year out right now. Nobody's exchanging. What's going on for you right now as a result of that? There's an emotional response, and I'm curious how many teams are creating that care and attention to just have a conference call or Zoom call together to check in and go, how you doing with this? Because there's all sorts of fears, right? Out of sight, out of mind. What if we don't get our traction? What if we sit out another year? And I think being able to share that and lean into your peer group is at least the adults demonstrating the emotional vulnerability. The other thing that came up for me is and I'm just blanking on who said the quote. You might know it. Is people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. And that was one of the things with students. I remember I myself was a Rotary Youth Exchange student. You might not know that as part of my story. And I remember going to my outbound orientation, and it was all older Rotarians, and I'm going to say north of 60 older. When you're 15 or 16, that's quite the gap. And here they were telling me about what homesickness is and preparing me. And I sat back in the audience thinking, have you ever been away from home? Have you at 16 or 17 ever gone away? And so that I don't care how much you know until like sometimes it's also who delivers that message. I know this is kind of running in a couple different directions here, but I think that's really critical for our audience to think about in terms of the vulnerability is in when you're structuring these weekends for training, who is the right message giver. I know some people on the team are fantastic to talk to parents. Maybe they were a parent in the program, they have experience firsthand. So, again, this is not someone in Rotary telling me what's going to happen. This is a past parent of the program who knows what it's like to watch their kids walk through the gate and security and not knowing what this entity called Rotary is and where their kid's going to be for a year. And so I think in terms of making that match to what you said, that's kind of how that plays out a little bit in our world.
Totally agree with you. In fact, I'll tell you right now, and all what we spoke about emotional vulnerability and stepping up to that is a leadership trait of empathy, right? And
Mhm.
right now, every single youth exchange leader, participant, organizer needs to step up, needs to step up, and needs to reach out to past participants, those that are maybe on the list of a future event coming up, and step up and say, listen, I'm here for you. Let's talk. Let's even have a casual conversation right now. How are you doing? I'm actively listening to you, and I'm showing empathy because I care. Talk to me. How can we help you? And maybe how can you help us? Bringing us into a group and us having this conversation. It's lacking. It's it's scary. It's scary right now out there, and this is an opportunity for youth exchange to step up, to be that guiding light for these generations that are out there having these challenges. And I think the opportunity is huge, because if we can show what I call Rotary core values of fellowship, diversity, integrity, service, and leadership, if we can show these core values to these next generations, to these generations that are gonna shape our world, huh? That's who's gonna shape it. If we can really build Rotary core values from an early age to them, we can really change the direction of our world. And it starts with each and every one of us, and especially those that have the opportunity to reach out and to bring them together, to step up. And I think that is a takeaway that we all need to do. We all need to step up. I don't think enough people out there are stepping up,
Hmm.
and we need everybody to do that. It's part of mentorship as well, right? Stepping up and reaching out to them and sharing, helping them, guiding them, giving them that hand, that showing them I care. Very important now more than ever. Very important.
And I just wanted to echo for all of the folks listening, everything that you just said actually applies as well to within the district team, right?
Yeah,
In terms of reaching out, connecting, how are you doing, mentoring, giving a hand. I think it starts first in the team, and building a strong team is the basis. When you have that leadership structure, that's what allows you to go build and continue delivering an incredibly solid youth exchange program or any other program in Rotary for that matter. So I think sometimes we get so focused on delivering our end result, which in this conversation is youth exchange, and we don't pay attention to, well, what do the core values look like within our district team? How are we doing on fellowship right now? How are we doing on leadership or integrity or et cetera? And we're now building on the conversation that takes the blocks of patience and vulnerability and truth and creating that space. So as a district team, as a multi-district team, that we can sit down and have these kind of conversations. Because one of the things, and I'm sure in your world it's the same, you shared how many different countries your district is. We've often used geography as the challenge, right? Oh, we only get to see each other once a year. And I think 2020 has leveled that, right? Because we've all moved online. So this excuse of, I don't want to make excuse, I understand it was a challenge, but now we have technology that's really come to the forefront where these conversations can become more than just once a year, right? And if we build on our foundation, I think that's where things start to some of the things that we might have viewed as problems before start to change because we're looking at the leadership of our team.
agreed. And you touched on a keynote of relationship building. We have opportunities to do that right now like never before. I mean, your smartphone is the key to that. We're zooming right now. That's such an easy way to connect when we're all so distant. Right now, there's apps that are out there. You know, Google launched Duo, which is a video app that you can use. You've got Google Meet, that's happening, pretty creative, very easy, touch of a button. Facebook Rooms is out there now, and there's several more. It just keeps popping up one after another. But the key in all of that is relationship building. I'm reminded of a quote where it says, "People do business with people who they know, like, and trust." I'm sure you've heard of it. It's a very popular one. But the key message there is, and when I say do business, it's the same thing. If you want to build a district team, you want to build a better experience for a seminar that you're doing, you got to build that relationship. And people will gravitate to you if they know, like, and trust you. I mean, there's a reason you and I connected here today, right? Uh, it's because of that connection, and there was a sense of comfort that you felt that you could reach out to me, and that I would be open-minded to listen to what you have to say and have a conversation with you about it. It didn't just happen randomly, right? Something aligned, and it's that same theory of people do business with people who they know, like, and trust. And the opportunity we have right now, there is no excuse, none whatsoever, to build that relationship right now, using technology that we have at our hands.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Well, I think part of my job in showing up to this call today is helping bring actionable steps to the ideas you're bringing. And the one that just sprung to mind when we talk about the importance of relationships, what I'd urge our audience to do as they're listening to this is take this conversation offline and look at all the relationships. So in the world of youth exchange, it could be, what are the relationships like on our district committee, just the leadership group itself? Let's really be honest about what's working, what's not working, what do we need to improve? Let's look at the relationships we have with our clubs, because without clubs participating, this is a club-based program, we don't have a lot going, right? So maybe we notice that's where we're weak. Look at the relationships we have with our international partners. Maybe we're not, so maybe we have to do some bridge building over the past years. It doesn't take, it's one foul exchange, and then all of a sudden we decide country X is no longer a country one exchange with. And I'm just going to share from my experience, a lot of it is because we've had no communication. We haven't been honest with our partner about what didn't work with that student, or what was going on, or where we felt the communication fell down. So I think there would be a fantastic activity that we could build out on this conversation of, let's look at all the relationships in your youth exchange program, and decide where we want to go to work this year. Because this reminds me a little bit of the enthusiasm I had at the beginning of COVID, where it was a big pause. And it was a
Yeah.
chance to put a pause on my life and think about what mattered to me, what was important, what was I really doing, the important activities. Did I really want to travel and do what I was doing? And so I think in youth exchange, it's no different. That I know we're kind of we're in the tough slog right now, where lots of people are having fatigue. And youth exchange teams are in this as well, with another layer, and they're fatigued with what's happening in the
Mhm.
world. So going and looking at where we stand relationship wise, where our relationship capital is, I think would be a massive positive takeaway from the notes that you're sharing.
Agreed. I totally agree with you. I want to add to that as well. When you look at the skill set that good and strong leadership should possess, one comes to mind is and creating an atmosphere where creativity and innovation and flexibility is encouraged, right? And I think of that, of how important that is right now, and is enough being done in the realm of youth exchange, for example, for creativity to flourish, for innovation, and for flexibility, right? To be able to change. I mean, we always do things in a particular way. What changes are happening right now in the world of youth exchange, for example? What changes that you feel is going to remain when we come out of at the other side of maybe 2021 or 2022? Who knows when? What changes? What creativity has happened? What has each one of the participants, the leaders, the organizers, what have they done to change the face of youth exchange going forward? Has anything been done? And if not, those conversations need to happen as you're doing that relationship building. Is it going to look the same as before? And if not, how has it evolved? What innovation has taken place? That's an important conversation. And if it is not happening, we are letting down the organization. It needs to happen because this is where the growth comes from. This is where those changes come from. This is where that innovation, what we call pivoting, right? You've heard that buzzword pivoting, our companies pivoting to take advantage of the current situation. Similarly, is youth exchange pivoting to take advantage? Because there are advantages. You've got people that need to be reached out to. You've got people that are probably at home and need that those connections. Uh, how are we pivoting? That's the question that I'm hoping people can answer
Hmm.
or at
Well,
least think.
yeah, and some of the things that are happening is there's a group out of Texas who's looking at a virtual exchange platform, that's so they're getting some traction and momentum. And as a pause, Europe, the conference that I was on with EMA, they were looking at, can we have Europe to Europe exchanges? There's no visas. There in some cases are no planes, so they could continue an exchange maybe perhaps in January. So it is looking at the situation and thinking, what's our reality? What are the cards on the table? And what does the world need from us, right? How can we actually respond? And as I'm thinking of that too, I want to stress that part of us having this conversation, because that last month we've got into the tactical part, strategic planning, which I think some of this conversation is weaving to. But what makes the opportunity to have a really solid strategic plan is the people underneath and the harmony in their relationships, right? And I know, because I've seen many youth exchange programs in action, there's a challenge there. There's in-house fighting, there's lack of succession planning, there's lack of honesty. I say this to my corporate clients all the time, where and maybe you've seen this in business, where we have the meeting after the meeting. You know the one I'm talking about, where I meet you at the water cooler and then I start complaining to you about, can you believe what our boss just said? Like, we're never going to hit that target. And to me, and I'm sure you probably in your leadership development know it, it's a sign of trust, right? There's
Yeah,
something didn't happen that I couldn't speak up in that meeting and say, hey, I think we're going on the wrong path. And that happens in youth exchange all the time. So sometimes it's easy to get involved in the tactical stuff. How many kids are we exchanging? Which clubs? Where are we going to place them? That's all tactical, that the people watching this video know how to do and do well. But what gets tricky is, I don't know about you, but I wasn't born with a manual on
yeah.
on how to get along with me and what to do when you're in conflict with me. And that's where, we're seeing some of the pinch points. So what else? I know you prepared some other thoughts. What else might come to mind for us to explore as other leadership principles for our youth exchange teams to look at?
So Simon Sinek is a famous author. He says to start with why, right? And in a similar light, I mentioned Stephen Covey. He talks about begin with the end in mind, right? And they're both kind of similar. And so even when you're getting people together into this room where you start to realize, I don't like what the leader is saying, whatever, thinking about the end result, I think is very important. Why are you doing what you do, right? Begin with the end in mind. Why are you doing what you do? Because maybe you've lost your way.
Mm.
Maybe you've lost your way. Maybe we're not achieving what you set out to do. And so that is very important. And it is okay to ask that question over and over again. Start with why, begin with the end in mind. I think this is very important as you're just having that conversation, because you're going to start realizing, even though we spoke about honesty, we spoke about creating empathy and patience, accepting people for as they are. If you don't even know why you're coming together, then how are you going to know what's the best way to put it together? And I think many times we don't ask that question enough. Why?
And the other thing that I'm seeing come up in the corporate space, which reminds me of this conversation, is the rallying cry. That's the why. Why do we exist right now? What are we all rallying around? What all makes sense to us? And I don't know about you, but if my rally cry is survival, that doesn't feel very motivating. You're not going to get the best out of me, right? If the rally cry in our team is, how do we thrive? So we have a pause right now in youth exchange for circumstances completely out of our control. So how do we make the best of this? One of the first videos we kicked off in this series was, I mean, we had a perfect storm. We have a bunch of students who just returned home in a pandemic. There was a whole lot of challenges that came along with that. But then we had Rotary clubs who moved on to Zoom and needed speakers. And we had rebound students who were desperate to tell their story. Do we not see the match. And so what was the why there? These folks were looking for productive challenges to process their experience and to market the program, so to speak. And a why of a Rotary Club is, well, we're looking for dynamic speakers to keep our members entertained. So I think that conversation always is a great one, because when we get down in the trenches, and being in youth exchange on a committee often is very stressful. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of teenagers to deal with. And so coming back to that why is it that we're doing this? What do we stand for as a team? Some of the things, and we talked about this in past calls as well, some programs have a really strong leadership core, which you would love to hear. So they've built that youth exchange experience of 10 or 12 months, and they have leadership modules that they walk their students through. Brilliant, right? So that at the end of the exchange, not only do we have cultural ambassadors, but we have people who understand leadership from a different perspective. Then we have other programs who think, well, let's offer a cultural experience. And none of these are right or wrong, but they've at least done the work to answer the why. Why do we exist as a program, which then falls out to what are we offering?
Yeah,
How are we sharing our experience with the world? So I completely agree that and sometimes when teams get really tangled, and the in-house fighting doesn't look so kind, it is nice to just say, wait, like, let's just have a look at why we started this in the first place, and why youth
exactly.
exchange exists. Really
Exactly.
great.
Very, very powerful questions to keep asking. I remember one thing I learned. Well, I guess some of those listening may not even be aware of a company called Kodak, because it went out of business so long time ago. But the question was asked, why did they go out of business, right? What went wrong? Okay. And I guess the blame falls into the fact that they didn't embrace digital technology and things of that nature, and they were just embracing physical photographs. But then somebody pointed out, and there's a reason I'm sharing this with you. Then somebody pointed out that they did not know what business they were in. And I was like, what? What do you mean by that? Of course they know what business they were in. They were in the business of hardware and photographs. And they said, no, that's not the business of Kodak. I'm like, well, what is the business of Kodak? And they say Kodak was in the business of preserving memories. And I was like, ah, I didn't look at it from that angle, right? And I guess neither did them. Because if you're in the business of preserving memories, then now you need to figure out what are the best ways to do that, right? And I use that example to you because it's the same way. What is the business of youth exchange? What is your end? What are you trying to achieve by bringing all these next generations of leaders together? What are you trying to achieve? And then if you're trying to achieve giving them leadership tools to create the world of the future, is it enough to do it in the frequency that you're doing it? Because when you talk about one of the primary capabilities of good leadership, they tell you it is not intensity, it is consistency.
Mm.
Only consistent delivery of leadership and exposure to leadership allows us to sharpen the saw, another one of those core values of the 7 habits of highly effective people, continuously sharpening the saw. So are we doing enough to sharpen the saw? Are we providing enough leadership development opportunities for youth exchange and the next generation of leaders out there? Are we doing enough? And if we're not doing enough, then that is something we need to figure out. How do we add more frequent, consistent opportunities to hone those skills? So these are questions that I want our audience to think about, right? Really delve on that
Yeah.
and see what you can do about that.
Well, and to me, the other thing is, so sharpening the saw is a really great one. Of, you can go into the forest with old equipment and you'll be there forever, right? And if it's like, hey, it looks like that saw's a little dull, like, no, just give me a couple hours, like, I'll get this, versus stopping, taking the time to actually sharpen the saw blade, and then the sawing goes more smoothly. That's a very simplified version of, I think, what that concept is. But here's what it looks like in real life in youth exchange, is that my colleagues and I go to these conferences after conferences. We have meetings with our district committees, and then nothing changes. And you can see the bookshelves behind me. I'm an avid reader. I do a whole lot of self-development in my own personal time. But if I never make any changes, or I read a book and say, here's two principles that I'm going to apply from that as a result, that really struck a chord. I think this is the gift of the current downtime of the pandemic for our youth exchange teams worldwide, to really have a reflective look of what does sharpening the saw look like. So many people have said this to me in the beginning of, this is really where we get to look at our program, right? We can look at our orientations and unpack them and decide where are they meeting the goals. I think sometimes we think the answer is more tools, more tools, more tools, when really it's, what do you already know? I have people call me constantly and say, hey, can you tell us the programs in North America that are really succeeding at X? And I'm like, the same people I do, right? So part of it now, what I want to encourage in this segment is for our colleagues to look into their toolbox and say, what do we already know? We went to 7 NAYEN conferences in a row, and we have lists and lists of notes from those conferences. Now's the time to actually pull those out and say, what makes sense? How do we update it? Because knowledge alone is not enough. It's taking action on the knowledge that we have, which I think is that sharpening the saw component too.
That's right. Absolutely. And I just a final thought for you, that it's one of my mantras I live by, and I think it's something that we all need to think about as well. It starts with you. It's not enough to say, all right, let's have a conversation. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? It starts with you. Mahatma Gandhi, I would say, probably said it best: be the change you wish to see in this world. And just like how you have stepped up to start having these conversations, you're going to share it with others. Whoever starts to step on that road, they have to do it. They have to step up and say that it's going to start with me. I can't just be talking about it. I got to act it. I got to do it. I got to believe in it. I got to be it. And that is important. So, yeah, we can talk about it as much as we want, but if we don't act on it, you're not going to see any difference. So I think we've given some interesting thoughts, interesting ideas, and I think it's important that whoever listens, they start to have those conversations. And even if you do a small little thing, small little steps, it's okay. It doesn't matter. Just one step, I think, will make a difference. Just one. Everybody just does one thing at one little time. I think it will make a difference. Yeah.
Mhm. Maybe my last ask of you is, I know you are an avid reader as well, and in the presentation that you gave to my Rotary Club, there was a slide with all sorts of books, which of course made my eyes light up, and I could have probably pulled them all off my bookshelf too. Would you be able to provide me offline a list of resources of maybe your top 10 leadership books that we could share below this video when we post it, and just give them more resources for folks who want to continue their own development? Because I think the bottom line message for me in listening to you today is our youth exchange programs are only as strong as the people who lead them. And if we're not, if we're having mediocre results on the output, then we have to look at the input. And this is where it gets tricky, because that's looking at ourselves, and the soft skills that you so eloquently talked about this morning.
Yeah. Agreed. Absolutely. I'll share those with you. One thing I will tell you that we should do, there's a book I read called Never Eat Alone. And it's literally about that one line. But what it made me realize, we have this opportunity every time where we can have conversations with people while we have to do a task of eating every single day, right? Breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And Never Eat Alone is basically saying, use that opportunity to have conversations, because that's what's going to make the world a better place, right? Just people getting together, people being compatible with each other, people in harmony with each other. And that book made me realize that even I miss these opportunities to get to know somebody, to becoming comfortable with them, to learn what their challenges are and discuss how I can help them, how they can help me. I think that was a profound one for me. Yeah.
Awesome. Any final thoughts for our I don't know, audience listeners today?
Yeah. If you don't know, it's okay. Say that you don't know, but don't lead anybody in a direction and all of a sudden you realize we're in bigger problems than we were. Be honest. Honesty is such a profound trait. Just be honest. And I think that genuineness will come out and people will embrace you a lot more.
Mhm. Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you on behalf of the North American Youth Exchange Network for taking time to give us some tools and thoughts to think about on how we can grow leadership capabilities in our district and multi-district teams. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.